Well, we finally got a little bit of cool air in here this past week. We're in the big moon phase at the moment. By the time this video comes out, we'll be on the backside of that big moon, but not too terribly far away from it. But the one thing that it has done is it pushed some water at her, so we had some negative tides. So one of the areas we have a kind of combination of that, both the negative tide and cooler water. We like to get up in here in Mustang Lake. Uh, hadn't fished in Mustang since last, I guess maybe February or March of this past year. And, it's one of these areas that's got lots of mud in it. You got lots of clump shell that's in there. You got a little bit of grass. You got deep water access that's close by right there at the ICW. And then when you got big old heavy north winds or even moderate winds like that out of the north, northwest, northeast, this is all sets up pretty well as far as being protected. So we decided to go up there and fish this on one of the particular days on that negative tide, chillier water, because water temp the past week on a couple of days, it got down in the upper 50s. I think 58 was one of the days that we got up here and fished this particular area, and then we were sitting at a negative point .1 or negative point .2 tide, so there wasn't a lot of water that was in the area, but we just kind of stayed on the deeper edges of it. Now, there's, like I say, if you've been in Mustang before, you know what the bottom is like. It's pretty silty, muddy, just from the tides and barges and stuff that come by there. It just kind of pushes and pulls water constantly, day in and day out. So we just kind of worked these areas here just to see if we had some fish that possibly was holding in here. Of course, our number one thing is we're looking for bait. See if there's bait working there, which we had that. So the great thing about it is we had big old high pressure days on top of that as well. So that sunshine was really warming that lake up because of that mud that was in there. So once that front passed through, we didn't have very significant winds of any kind that were just kind of just kept blowing and blowing. So it really had an opportunity to warm up. So by the time we got done with our trip on that one particular day that we fished in here, it had warmed back up into the low 60s, which is significant. 2 or 3 degrees this time of year makes a big deal for fish, so they like that. So, and as the case would have it, as the day progressed, the bait got a little bit more active, and so did the fish. So we were trying to fish around the moon set. We fished mainly the moon under majors was when our time frame we could get up into here. So we just worked these edges, worked the back lake mouths, worked over the shell, worked all the way back in here. Of course, as we got further to the back there wasn't just a tremendous amount of water hanging there, so there wasn't hardly any fish that were back there. Plenty of bait, because that water had warmed up some, so those bait fish had pushed back in there. So we were trying to find the drop edges in a little bit deeper water, so we found more fish. Now, it wasn't a great number of fish, but we found fish more out in the middle and on the edges of that grass line and just a little bit deeper water where it was thigh deep. Of course, it's pretty mushy, so if you have not fished in here, just prepare yourself, because there's going to be days where it's going to be pretty nasty that's going to be in there. Of course, and then we just kind of worked our way out. Since we didn't find a tremendous amount of fish, though, we just wanted to see more than anything else. Then we pushed ourselves on the outside edge, and you got plenty of wading area that's out here by the ICW. So this is where we found a little bit more fish out here closer to that deep water access, and right there up against all that riprap and everything that pushes down here on the ICW. Again, being very aware of barges when they come through, we just kind of pushed ourselves up close to the shoreline, because the amount of tidal movement that comes and goes when those things come by. So always be aware of that if you're going to fish up in this particular area, or even all the way down Sundown, any of that area there like that. The same type of situation applies to that. Anywhere you can wade on the outside on the ICW, you're going to get that scenario. But this is where we found and located some fish outside of being in Mustang. So knowing that was going to be a big moon in play that was on the front side of it, and we're heading toward the main part of the big moon, we were throwing primarily smaller baits. We were throwing soft dines. We were throwing mirror lure Little Johns and Little John XLs. Really trying not to get anything over a 4-inch bait, but maybe just giving it just a little bit bigger profile, but a smaller bait. That's why the mirror lure Little Johns and the XLs really kind of worked well, and then, of course, the soft dines do this, kind of fit that same bill. The Double D, we've thrown the Double D, and it did pretty well as far as production goes. We got some good opportunities with that particular bait. And then, of course, our standbys, the down south. Burner shad was the primary bait that we threw. Of course, that water being out there on the ICW and up in Mustang was a little bit dirtier, even with the winds being not as breezy, but a little bit more stain to it. So we were sticking to more of a solid colors that were up in there. Purple Rain's one we haven't thrown in a long time, so we pulled that out and threw that. It did pretty well. The Watermelon Red did well for us. Bone Diamond did pretty good for us as well in those particular flavors. Big Papa was another flavor that was doing all right. Now, is some of the sections where the water was a little bit more stained. We had some guys that were throwing some with more chartreuse and having pretty decent success with that. So that would be my suggestion. Again, I've said in past, I'm not a big chartreuse fan at all. I'm more the pure flavors and colors. So, but in that particular scenario, when you got a little bit dirtier water, that's where the chartreuse comes in handy for that. So one particular bait in the Miraloo Little Johns is the chicken with the chartreuse. It's not got a lot on it, but it's just got, maybe a 1/4 inch of chartreuse there, and it did pretty well. Again, throwing 16th ounce jig heads, working everything pretty slow. Nothing at a fast pace whatsoever. It was kind of mimicking what the bait and how the bait was responding in that cooler water, because that's the cooler water we've had in quite a while, being in the upper 50s. If I could say that, 57 to 59 degrees, pretty chilly. So those fish were a little bit sluggish until we started locating them, hanging off kind of on the ICW side on the little bit deeper water until that water kind of warmed up for us. But that's kind of scenarios that we're going to have moving forward. Looks like we possibly have another front that's going to be pushing in either later this week or early part of next week as we get closer to Christmas time. Very important for you to make sure that you pay attention to what those weather patterns are going to be doing as far as those fronts pushing in, because that will dictate where you want to fish and how you want to fish. Again, with the conditions that we had for a few days this past week with the front that pushed through, it pushed a lot of water out. So Spalding is another one of the areas. Spalding Bight is another one of the areas that I like to fish during that, because you really get the opportunity to work the mouths and the channels and the guts that run up into these back lake mouths. You've got 4 or 5 that are in here that work really well for you. You got deeper water in that, and when you get the cold water, like say 50, 57, 58, 59 is pretty chilly for these fish when they typically have not been in it for several months. Has not been anything really colder than about 62 or 63 degrees. So again, you don't think 3 or 4 degrees is that significant, but fish it is. It's a really big deal. But again, this area out here, when these lower tides or negative tides, the back lake mouths really set up good for us, and we can work those, and we can work down the edge. You can wade them. These are not so mushy that you can't wade through them, and depending on the depth of the water that's in there. Now you can get back there in some of these back lakes. Like we waded up into this middle back lake right here, which is one of my favorites ones to get into. There just wasn't a lot of water back in there. We ended up throwing some top water in there and got a few blow-ups, but didn't get any takes. But that just kind of let us know, okay, there's some fish that are holding in here, but it was typically, knee-deep or less water that was back in that back lake. So, again, working the edges, working the deeper guts that run back into these back lakes are a key thing. Like I say, there's shell pads that are back in some of these. We're back in this particular back lake here. The same scenario is knee to calf deep water. Just throwing top water, because anything else, you were going to have a really difficult time working over top of that grass that's back in there. And it's kind of mushy in some spots, so, but it was worth a chance to see if we had some fish who were pushing back in there. Now, we were not hitting these areas early in the morning, not first thing. We were waiting for that sun, because, like I say, we had some high pressures in place for a couple of days, big old bluebird skies. So we knew, if we waited till 11, 12 o'clock, even 1 o'clock, if we wanted to fish that late, we were going to have some opportunities. Little water coming back, water temperature warming up, bait got a little bit more active. So that's kind of the scenario that you have to really put in your mind and understand if these are areas that you want to target and understand what's going on, what's in play. So we kind of stayed out on the outer edge early, fishing the more thigh deep to waist deep water that we could find. Working over structure. There's plenty of mud and clump shell that's in these areas back in here. So you just have to kind of be careful with that. And of course, the other thing too that's happened, the split season for duck has opened back up. So this past Saturday, duck season opened back up. So that's another thing that we had to put back into our game plan because it's been shut down for a little bit. So it was nice to be able to run back in some of these areas and not have to worry about that. So now that's going to be back in play, I think, all the way up till February. I'm not up on all the duck hunting rules and how long and all that, but from just talking to different guys, looks like it's either right at the end of January or 1st of February, something in that time frame. So you got roughly a month and a half more to deal with that scenario. So just take that in mind. And also, just FYI, flounder season has opened back up. So that's another great thing that gives you something else when you catch some of those, because we have caught those over the past month. And it was, nice to get a few pictures of those, but, unfortunately had to put them back in the water. So, but anyhow, that season's back open. If you're a flounder person and like to catch and keep those, then you'll have that opportunity. And we just kind of work these edges out here. Again, structure was the main thing, finding mud. Moving forward, mud, grass, and clump shell are going to be the three styles of structure that you're really going to want to focus and be over the top of. Paying attention to your weather patterns is going to be a big deal, making sure that you can be able to incorporate a major or minor into your deal. Like I say, we've had the big moon in play. We'll be on the back side of that. And then, again, we're just throwing burner shads, 4-inch baits at most, like the Little Johns and Little John XLs. Is really a terrific bait during those time frames. The soft dines, the smaller version, not the XL. Those were have been very productive for us. Like I say, it's a shorter bait, but it's a little bit fatter in profile. So those fish kind of like that, and we've had opportunities with those. Depending on if you got back in some back lakes, like I said, we threw some top water back in there. We were throwing like the Spook Juniors or the She Dog Junior or something to that effect in the head and top water baits. Just a smaller bait, just a smaller profile. Just so those fish would have an opportunity. Like I say, they're predominantly night feeders, so when you have a big moon in play this time of year, they really spend their time out there at nighttime looking and hunting and trying to find and catch your fish. Like I say, we had productive mornings until we got to about 10-ish, 11 o'clock, and then it really tapered off, so we had to kind of change our game plan up moving forward through the rest of the day. So always incorporate that, understand that what you have going on, and just make sure that you just kind of layer yourself up this time of year because it can get pretty chilly out there on that water. Back here in Swan. Swan's another one of these areas this time of year when you have the right kind of water temperature and conditions that really kind of set up for it. It will lend itself for you to have some quality days on the water. Now, I didn't spend multiple days back here in Swan. It was another one of those just kind of more exploring after we had the colder air that moved in here with the front and lower tides. So I just kind of want to see and explore and see what's going on back here. Like I say, you get on the back side of these little islands and the little mouths that cut through from the Copano side into Swan Lake. This is where you get your nice mud and grass and that kind of stuff that's all back behind here. Super mushy. If you have not waded that, just prepare yourself if you're going to wade it. It is... you're getting into some knee-deep mud, even deeper than that in some of the areas. It gets probably about middle of your thigh deep. It's not sticky. You can navigate it if you want to. You're gonna have to really kind of set your sights on. This is where I want to be. No matter what, I'll contend with it. But you just have to kind of take your time and work back in here. When I say that, that means that's because you're having to step and probably keep 1 foot on top of that mud while you're standing on the bottom. There's a bottom to it. It's just way down in there. Again, throwing burner shads back in this area over the top of that grass, throwing the double Ds back in this area. That water back in here, especially on those high pressure days, that water was pretty clean. So we were throwing more translucent stuff like the Little Johns and the golden red glitter and the kitchen sink. That's kind of got a yellow, black, and white flake that's in it, but it's translucent body. The firecracker and supernatural in the burner shad for down south, and then we filtered in or structured in a little bit of the greenbacks and the heavy metal that worked pretty well in the knock and tail lure, and then of course the soft dines, and just kind of worked those and like I say, the smaller profile. We weren't throwing anything big. We didn't throw I don't think myself or anybody that I had with me this past week, we threw anything bigger than a 4-inch bait. Everything was pretty much smaller, a little more compact, fatter profile, and that's where we had the most of our production. So as far as throwing a bigger bait during that time frame, yeah, if you want to, fire it out there and see what happens with it. I just understand what goes on when we have a high pressure in place and you lose a lot of water. Those fish are not real apt. And coming off that big moon, they're feeding most of the night, so they're not looking for something super big during the day. So always put that kind of in your game plan on how you work. We just spent a little time on the back shoreline. We were having to work that probably about 20 to 30 yards off the shoreline so that we'd be in deep enough water. We could still throw back up toward the shoreline if we wanted to prospect and see if there's anything hanging in there. But primarily everything came off about this deep of water. We were knee to thigh deep, maybe the top of our thigh deep water. I don't really remember getting anything any deeper than that. Of course, it's got, like I say, it's got the right type of structure that's in here. You got the squishy mud, you got the grass that's in here. We had bait that was working in there, and I would say that we still have a decent amount of bait working in our system right now. But I would think that once we get a few more cold fronts and that water temp is going to consistently hang in that mid to low 60s, high 50s, that bait's really going to get scarce. So that's why the artificial game this time of year moving forward until we get back into probably late April and May becomes a big player. Can you catch them on other baits? Sure. Yeah, it's not a big deal, but that's why we throw artificials, man. It's a great time of the year for that, and you have great opportunities with that. So, and we've had a few good opportunities, caught a few quality fish here and there. But we're consistently catching fish, and that's the main goal. So as long as we're doing that, we're doing the right things and putting all the right scenarios in place, and our game plan's working for us. So make sure that you have a good game plan. Make sure you have multiple baits available to you based on what's going on with the moon phase and weather patterns. Majors and minors are always a big deal. If you can always incorporate that in fishing day, you're going to give yourself the best opportunity to find and catch fish.